Warning, the following video contains major spoilers for Spider-Man No Way Home. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I highly recommend that you wait to watch this video until you have. With that out of the way, let's get on with it. Hi, my name is Maddie, and I have a serious problem with the ending of Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, don't get me wrong, the movie as a whole is phenomenal. It's a fantastic ending to the Homecoming trilogy and to MCU Peter Parker's high school era. Getting to see nearly 20 years worth of Spider-Man villains return and interact with each other is a treat, and getting to see Tobey Maguire return, as well as providing closure to Andrew Garfield's arc from the Amazing films, is just icing on the cake. Taking it all together makes No Way Home one of the most unique comic book movies to date, and though it's technically not the first multiversal Spider-Man film, it is a completely different tone and feel from Into the Spider-Verse. But the main thing I have an issue with is the film's final 10 minutes or so, where it leaves Peter Parker and his supporting cast, how that could affect where MCU Spidey goes from here, and what they've teased is coming next. So let me recap the film's ending to refresh your mind, and I'll explain why I have a problem with it. As Peter, and Peter battle the villains on Captain Liberty here, Green Goblin plants a bomb in the Machina de Cadavres, aka the Magic Box, which blows it up and unleashes MCU Peter's botched spell, causing the multiverse to splinter, with Doctor Strange unable to repair the damage. After the villains are all cured, Strange tells Peter that it's too late to save their universe, as everyone who knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man in every possible universe is converging on theirs. Peter then suggests that Strange cast a new spell, making everyone in their universe forget who Peter Parker is, essentially erasing Peter, but not Spider-Man, from history. After some convincing, Strange agrees, and Peter goes to say his goodbyes to MJ and Ned before their memories are wiped, promising he'll find them and explain everything. But, of course, Peter doesn't have the heart to drag his friends back into his chaotic life as Spider-Man, and lets them go to MIT with no memory of him. He moves into a new apartment that looks strikingly similar to Tobey's apartment in Spider-Man 2 and 3, and makes a new Spidey suit by hand, swinging out into the night to fight crime once more. Now, on paper, this ending seems great. It builds upon the themes of every action having consequences, and leaves the story very open-ended as to where it might go next. It makes the entire Homecoming trilogy seem like an extended origin story for the character, which is emphasized by the fact that May reiterates the "with great power comes great responsibility" line just before her death. And in practice, the ending also works really well. It gives Peter consequences for his actions, bringing the movie's themes to a bittersweet climax. But as any fan of the original Sam Raimi films or the university running the comics would tell you, relationships are the most important aspect of the best Spider-Man stories. Jon Watts absolutely understands this, but I'm concerned that because of the way No Way Home ends, the directors that follow him, and more importantly, the executives at Sony, will choose to forget rather than expand upon those relationships. Because MJ and Ned have forgotten who Peter is, and the fact that they're moving to Boston to attend MIT, there's a chance this could be the very last time we see either of them in the MCU. Admittedly, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's realistic. Some people lose contact after they graduate high school, though obviously not under these exact same circumstances. I'm only still in regular contact with a couple of my high school friends, and I only graduated 2 years ago. Not to mention the fact that this is exactly how Peter's high school run ended in the comics. The vast majority of his supporting cast, including Liz Allen and Flash Thompson, were written out of the story to make way for a new supporting cast, namely Mary Jane Watson, Gwen Stacy, and Harry Osborn. However, the high school run of comics had a very different tone from the university era, which the Homecoming movies replicated almost exactly. If you'd like a more in-depth analysis of this and the Homecoming trilogy as a whole, Implicitly Pretentious has a fantastic video essay that I'll link in both the description and in this card in the top right corner. But the reason I bring this up is the one area the Homecoming trilogy differs the most from the comics it's inspired by: its character relationships. The original comics treat the relationships between Spider-Man and his supporting cast a lot more like punchlines to jokes in the high school area, rather than really focusing on the depth of them like they do in the university era. However, with each movie in the Homecoming trilogy, an increasing emphasis has been put on the character relationships. In Homecoming, Peter has a massive crush on Liz Allen, and that relationship is one of the major focuses of the film. Not only does it serve to emphasize Peter's immaturity at certain parts, but it also works as a mechanism to make the lives of Peter Parker and Spider-Man collide, when it's revealed that the Vulture is Liz's dad, and Peter has to choose between going to the dance with Liz or taking down the Vulture. Additionally, this film also builds up the relationship between Ned and Peter, establishing their dynamic for the future movies in the series. Relationships are also a major aspect of the plot in Far From Home, as throughout the entire movie, Peter is trying to win the affections of MJ, and it's part of the reason why he's so reluctant to leave his school trip to help Nick Fury and Mysterio stop the elementals. When MJ eventually reveals that she knows Peter is Spider-Man, Peter begins to question if she only spent so much time with him because of her suspicion. But eventually, by the end of the movie, the two confess their love for each other with all the awkwardness of high schoolers in love, and everything looks like it's going to be fine. At least, it does, until...
Come to you now with revelations about last week's attack in London.
He has an army of weaponized drones, Stark Technology, and he's saying he's the only one who's going to be the new Iron Man, no one else.
There you have it, folks. Conclusive proof that Spider-Man was responsible for the brutal murder of Mysterio.
Spider-Man's name is Peter Parker.
When Peter's identity as Spider-Man is revealed, Peter's relationships with both Ned and MJ are thrown into jeopardy and tested, as their involvement with Peter's hero work not only makes them public outcasts just like Peter, but it also has the potential of legal consequences and prevents them from getting into all of their chosen colleges, ruining their plans for their futures. This is what motivates Peter to go to Doctor Strange in the first place, kicking off the events of the film. Think about it this way. If it wasn't for Peter's relationships with MJ and Ned, the entirety of No Way Home would not have happened, at least not the way it did. And by removing these characters only to hurriedly replace them with Harry Osborn and or Gwen Stacy in the next movie or trilogy, that would essentially mean that nothing that happened in the Homecoming trilogy really mattered. I'm not against them adding either of those characters. They're iconic and deserve to be included. But if they come at the cost of Ned and or especially MJ never appearing in the series again, I don't think the trade-off is worth it. And knowing Sony and their decision makers, I'm very concerned this will be the direction they take. If you were involved in the Marvel fandom back in summer of 2019, you'll know that only a few weeks after Spider-Man Far From Home released, there were reports coming out that Marvel and Sony had failed to renegotiate the deal which would have allowed Spider-Man to appear in Marvel Studios' films. Essentially, Spider-Man would have to be removed from the MCU. Thankfully, about a month later, Sony and Marvel announced the deal had been renegotiated, and Spider-Man would remain a part of the MCU for the time being. But the message this sent was clear. Sony was, and likely still is, looking for a way out. And that's what scares me the most about this ending. I don't trust Sony not to try and use this as an excuse to sever Spider-Man's ties with the rest of the MCU, and basically soft reboot him in the universe they've been making with the Venom films. And the fact that, based on the mid-credits scene, they're teasing a Venom arc coming sometime down the line, and Venom is a character that Sony owns the exclusive film rights to, I'm scared this could be the end of MCU Spider-Man. I mean, the Venomverse films are fine, but they're nowhere near the quality of anything in the MCU, including the Spider-Man films. Executives like Amy Pascal and Avi Arad have run previous Spider-Man franchises, most notably the Amazing Spider-Man films, into the ground by bloating them with too many subplots and setups for future films, mandating the use of certain characters against the director's wishes, and, in the case of Amy Pascal, being one of the most immature Hollywood executives I have ever seen. In the end, it all depends on the director they choose for the next film or films, and how much freedom they're given. If Marvel and Kevin Feige are involved in the decision-making process there, I think they're probably in good hands. But if Sony tries to cut them out, Tom Holland's Spidey could really be in trouble. Then again, Pascal and Arad also produced Into the Spider-Verse, which is my favorite film of all time, so maybe I'm just making a bigger deal out of this than it needs to be. Still, I don't think this concern will go away until we hear a little more about what's next for MCU Spidey, and what decision they're planning on taking for his future. I hope you all enjoyed this little explanation, and I hope it made you think about where MCU Spider-Man could go from here. Are there any villains you're hoping will show up in the future? Leave them down in the comments. Personally, I'm hoping we get to see a live-action version of Black Cat, but that's just my inner lesbian rearing its head. And make sure you like the video and subscribe for more, as I'm hoping to make some more videos like this in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a fantastic rest of your day.